You're a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
That's your title, right?
Yeah. We bought a house last August in Tuscany.
And what's funny is that it took you buying real estate outside of this country to really get you in the game of real estate here. You're excelling in life in so many different ways. So I'm just so glad to get into your story there.
I remember since I was little, always wanting to be a mom, but didn't necessarily want to birth a child. We got married when we were 29. So we started the adoption process as soon as we could, about 18 months later.
What made you guys want to adopt like outside of the United States?
That's always a hard question to answer.
Let's see how you do under pressure. Yeah, I've been wanted this.
I feel like this is the only genuine conversation we have like all week.
Myself up, moving on to the better.
Kara Mosby, welcome to WillPower. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm so glad that, one time, so we just hit 100 episodes on the podcast, and I like having conversations in person. There's so many people that I'd like to have on, and they will come on, but they're like, let's do it on Zoom or Riverside or whatever.
Yeah.
I just don't like this as much. So out of 100 episodes, we've had less than 5 that were remote. And I've actually traveled outside to San Diego, Vegas, Texas, Nashville to go like have like conversations like this.
You need an assistant?
Hey, maybe you we're going to get into that. So the more people that you have locally, and Tulsa is actually like bigger than I think most people think it is. We have over 1 million people in the Tulsa metro area, but it's crazy that even though it's so small, sometimes it's hard to find people that you need for whatever it is, right? In my case, it's like, who can I have on that has like a cool story that can relate with people, can motivate people, and a story that somebody can take a listen and be like, man, like I don't have it as bad as I thought I did, and maybe I can actually. One of my most favorite things that you said, in the questions that we sent you. And what we'll talk about is you said it's the dream that we never knew to dream. And to start off, anybody that hasn't heard your name, you're a stay-at-home mom. Yeah. That's your title, right?
Yeah.
But you downplay it a lot. You and your husband just bought a house in Spain? Italy. Go ahead. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we bought a house last August in Tuscany.
And what's funny is that it took you buying real estate outside of this country to really get you in the game of real estate here, because that's another thing too. And that's really when I went to your page, I was like, I didn't really, because you guys asked me about, you're like, is it because we bought the house in Tuscany? I was like, oh, I didn't even see that. But I just saw that you guys are now starting to flip homes here. And the whole reason you started that is so that way you're able to generate more income to flip that house over there and then travel more. Right?
Yeah. We were sitting at, we were actually our first time in Italy, in Venice, at Christmas time, 2023. And our friends had us over and said, hey, you guys have big dreams and your kids have big needs. You need to get into real estate. And then a few months later, they called us and said, hey, we found a house in Italy. We were like, we thought you meant the U.S., but okay.
Man, but you guys implemented, and that's where you guys are where you're at today. The other thing about you is that you're big into nonprofit. You were with John 316 for how many years?
I've been there about 14 years in several different roles.
14 years, and you and your husband played a big role in bringing refugees from Afghanistan. About 80, is that what it was?
800.
800. I was missing a zero there.
Oklahoma had about 2,000 that came, and Tulsa about 800.
How many do we have as a country? Do you know?
Afghans?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like estimate, because I remember when you and I met, I was like, wait, am I thinking of the right thing? Whenever we were seeing like people literally running, trying to jump on an airplane because like, I mean, anybody listening, like if you think you have a bad, like, I always tell people that that I grew up poor, but I grew up poor in Mexico, which is a different country, which poor in a different country is different than poor here in the United States. Yeah. And then last but not least, you have 2 kids and they are actually not from here.
Yeah.
They're
both
from
adopted.
From India and Ethiopia. They're both, I got to meet one of them. And so you have a really cool story that I just kind of wanted, I want to kick it off with one of the answers that you gave us, and you said, I like to say that I'm mediocre with this, this, and this, and then I found that mediocrity is kind of a blessing. Talk to me about that.
Well, I think we live in a world where you're supposed to be exceptional in everything, and we raise our kids to play AAU basketball and have private coaches, which my daughter has a private basketball coach. But I played basketball growing up. I was never going to play in college. I had A's and B's. I was never exceptional at anything. I was just mediocre, which I think most people are. And I think that's encouraging to people to see others that they're just who they are doing life, and not, I'm an introvert, so I'm not out there and, oh my gosh, let me show you what I did.
Yeah.
But so I think it's a blessing.
You're more extroverted than your husband, it seems like, though, because I met both of you guys. Would you say that, yes or no?
Yeah, there's a term called ambiverts.
Okay, I never heard that.
It's like almost like where you're like half introvert, half extrovert.
Is that both of you guys? Mm-hmm. Okay.
He's a little bit more extroverted than I am. It just depends on what role or what scenario we're in. We're working in nonprofit. I have to have a lot of extrovertedness out there. Like, hey, let me tell you our mission, what we do. So then when I go home, I'm very introverted, but he's an engineer, so it takes a lot of his introvertedness there. And so at church and other areas, he's very extroverted.
Gotcha. So did you ever think, or do you think now, that you're exceptional at one thing, anything in your life? It doesn't have to be like sports, like business, like just anything. It could even be being a mom.
Oh, exceptional is a big word, it feels like. So I don't know.
Use a different word, like really good at, really good at.
We were talking before we started just about where my son is. My son has autism, and I think I'm exceptional at discernment for what he needs, and being able to listen to the voices we needed for him and tune out the voices we didn't need. I think that took a really special gift.
So you're not mediocre at that.
Okay. No, I'm not mediocre at being his mom.
But I'm glad that you brought that up, though, because you're completely right. Everybody is, especially now with social media, like it has taken it to the next level where people, I think that people, I haven't heard this quite in a while, but the saying like keeping up with Joneses used to be like, you would just look at your neighbors and be like, oh, they just got a new car. Maybe I need a new car. Or like, hey, just what you could see from like a walking distance per se, or like at work or whatever. Now you can see somebody else's neighbor across the world and that they just got a new car.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, sometimes I like to remind people that at least back then people would be able to see if the Joneses maybe had a bad day and maybe they were fighting.
Yeah.
And you could be like, oh, well, at least they fight too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not that
You're
horrible
only seeing
person.
the best.
In social media now, it's funny because people think that they like know me, which like I put a lot of myself out there, but I really put about less than 5% of like, outside of like my niche, which is like just educating people on how to buy a house. Like in my stories, like I share a lot of my life, but it's very, very minimal.
Yeah, as it should be.
Yeah, but people think that that's my entire life. Which if all your, and I do try to like post some transparent stuff, and that people can relate the most with that. Because imperfect is what attracts people. But most people don't do that. Most people are like, I would never post a picture without makeup on or whatever, right? So
do you wear makeup?
No, I'm just
sorry.
Actually, I have a really small part in our Christmas play. Like, I'm talking really small. It starts with like a
at church or at the
at church. Yeah.
Okay.
With 30-second, not even 30 seconds, and my face is not even towards the camera, and they just put so much makeup on me.
Yeah.
And I just felt so uncomfortable. And then they were like, but I looked in the mirror and I looked the same. And then they were like, do you want a makeup wipe? And I was like, do I need it?
Thing.
And then I had to use like 3 or 4 of those. I was like, I kudos to you ladies. But anyways, you have a girl that you're like has never put a picture up there without makeup, and you're like, man, like she's perfect every time. She wakes up perfect. So
I think Pamela Anderson is in the news recently because she just wrote a book, and all of her interviews have been without makeup on.
And people are like, just like, what? Like, that's so strange.
Looks great.
So I'm glad. That's why I wanted to start it off with, is because I think that if somebody's listening right now, and because mediocrity is normally used not in the way that we're talking about it, which right now we're kind of like hyping it up. But most people especially people that are listening, they think of like, man, I'm mediocre. Like nobody wants to say that.
Yeah.
But it's mostly because of like everything that you're comparing yourself to. And anybody listening, I just wanted to like really get into your story to let people know, and I didn't know this about you until you literally answered that question, but somebody that feels like, hey, I'm mediocre about everything, you're excelling in life in so many different ways. So I'm just so glad to get into your story there. So let me ask you this. Was it always a thing for you and your husband to adopt?
Yeah, I remember since I was little, always wanting to be a mom, but I didn't necessarily want to birth a child. And so it was something we talked about before we got married, and few years. We got married in Oklahoma. This is late. We got married when we were 29. So we started the adoption process as soon as we could, about 18 months later. But it took a very long time for them to come home.
Okay, so because the last thing that I missed was that you guys travel a bunch. I mean, I think the whole buying a house in Tuscany kind of maybe gave it away, but how many countries did you and your husband say that you've been to?
He's been to like 30. I'm nowhere close.
But he drags you along to a lot of them now after you guys got...
Oh yeah, we get alerts on our phone all day long about cheap tickets.
So you started the process right away, like right when you got married. You're like, we know we want to adopt. And what made you? I know I asked you this, but refresh my memory. What made you guys want to adopt like outside of the United States?
That's always a hard question to answer because children that need families, whether it's here or abroad. One of my best friends growing up was Ethiopian, and so. That always was a draw for me because I grew up around her family and culture. And so that was just we didn't even really think about it. So that's a hard.
You didn't think about like adopting here, or you didn't think about like, oh, hey, this is kind of normal. Like, let's just try to fill out applications for different countries or.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, about 10 years ago. And there was a great ministry that you would fill out an assessment. And they would kind of show you where a good avenue for you to go was. And we knew we wanted to go international adoption. And we, being older, getting married in Oklahoma, but not having been married for very long, we qualified for Russia and Ethiopia. And so that was a very no-brainer decision for us since I'd been around Ethiopian culture growing up. And then Russia shut down and just like 6 months later after we made that decision.
You can't adopt kids from Russia anymore?
Nope. Or Ethiopia anymore.
Why is that?
Ethics. Russia, it's a very long story of politics.
Okay.
But Ethiopia, they needed to get some things in line to make sure that children who are being adopted really do need adoption, that's the best option for their family.
Gotcha. For them. And then your son is from India, and that's
vice versa.
I keep messing this up. So what led you guys to adopt him from a different country at that point?
So we just went through the process and started the process with Ethiopia, and then as soon as he came home, because it takes so long, we turned around and started the adoption process to bring our daughter home from India.
And was that process a lot shorter?
It was, yeah. We had a kid at that point, so it took longer to do all the paperwork.
Yeah.
But we got the paperwork in, and we were matched with her pretty quickly compared to we waited about 2 years before we were matched with our son. And then we waited a year before we could go bring her home. And
you mentioned that, he's autistic, he has, different things. Is that something that you knew whenever you adopted him? So when did you find that out? Like how soon or how later after he came here?
That would have been January of this year. We knew about a year ago that a therapist had mentioned it, and I was like, you're using a word that no one else has ever used. You keep saying autism. And she said, yes, your son is autistic. I was like, oh, okay. So.
And then, so since it was this year, you said that, so the schooling that you had for him before that you've told me off camera, that had nothing to do with like trying to keep him there for like, he just joined a new school because you just found out. Is that correct?
Yeah. So about a year ago we knew, but it takes so long to get kids tested. We were on one waiting list that was a year long. And then we found someone at OU Tulsa that could get him in about 4 months. So we knew about a year before he was actually diagnosed.
And what, is that something that you guys like ever, like, were you guys really shocked whenever they told you that or?
No, we'd known that he was struggling.
Yeah.
And had been going through lots of therapies and testing. But when she said that, it actually clicked for us. Like, okay. Like that puts some things into perspective for us and helps us advocate for him better. And there's so many things where, especially for boys with autism, it can come across as bad behavior. And then you're just addressing bad behavior when actually there was more going on for him. And so I have great mentors, and they were like, this is not bad behavior. And so they kept pushing us in that way. And so when we heard autism, it just put things into perspective. And it was actually able for us, coming from, we both have great extended families, but, you know, very strict, and this is how we behave in certain areas. We do not do this in other areas. And so you raise your kids like that, and he was not fitting into that box. So when we're like, you know, we're supposed to have well-behaved kids. And so it helped us calm down a little bit on how to best help him. Most
people listening would think like if they found out that their kid was autistic, they would be like, you know, probably not reacting that way, but it sounds like it brought you guys relief. It's because you guys were like, we've known, but like this makes sense now.
And I think for him, he knows he has autism. So I think that helps him as well know, okay, this is normal
for me. Yeah. Gotcha. I really want to talk about like, what was it that made you guys implement into your friends telling you guys, like, you guys need to get into real estate? Like, what, you guys have made some big decisions over the last couple of years to where, like, what truly drove that? Like, what was the why behind those answers and the choices that you guys made to buy that house in Tuscany and then truly like getting into the real estate game? Like, what drove that? So
I think I mentioned this earlier. We were sitting in Venice, and our friends are in real estate in Nashville. And they said, hey, your kids have big needs. And we didn't know at the time that Triku had autism, but we were paying for a lot of therapies out of pocket. And we were orienting our lives around spending our resources to best help him. And they said, your kids have big needs and you guys have big dreams. You've got to get into real estate. And so that was sitting in Venice, and we started the process of, we got a HELOC, and we're just starting to look at things. And they gave us a call and said, we found a house in Italy. What do you guys think? And we thought, well, I thought we were going to get into real estate in Tulsa or in Nashville, not abroad. But yeah, they hopped on a plane a few days later and went and looked at it.
One of the questions I was going to ask you for anybody listening, that, because the thing is, it's easy to hear people's stories of where they're at now, but it's so hard to comprehend, like, really, like, how did you get there, right? Yeah.
Small steps.
And you just did something that normally, like, most people would do. In this case, somebody like me would say, like, we just got a HELOC or whatever. Like, most people don't even know what that is. So
we didn't either.
So, and it's funny because I actually just did a video about this on pretty much using the equity, like, in your home. And for anybody listening, it makes it a lot easier to do things if you already own a home.
Yeah.
Especially if you've lived in that home for either a long time or at least since COVID, because since COVID,
That's when we purchased. We got a great interest rate.
I saw a thing that within Tulsa County, its appreciation has gone up like over $100,000 since 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So for anybody listening that didn't know what that meant, is you guys had equity in your home, but you can't grab money from the wall. So you guys went to the bank and borrowed against that equity. And so that's what got you guys started. And and then you guys ended up using that to buy the house in Tuscany. Is that correct?
Yeah, because we had to buy it with cash.
And then which anybody listening as well, I feel like we take for granted how easy we have it to buy homes here. I'll taking the fact that like you guys aren't citizens there, don't work there, because of course, but in all the videos that I've posted, people from all over the world will comment on it, and then they'll be like, what? You only need 3 or 5% to buy a home?
Yeah.
Like like in some countries they need like 50% or something to buy a primary home.
Yeah.
And I feel like people take that for granted because it's like, that's so easily accessible for so many Americans, right? So, and
still hard for a lot.
Yeah.
Especially as the home prices go up.
Hard and easy, right? Because you have like inflation going up, and then also easy as far as like it's still achievable, especially in our great state where we live in, right?
Yeah.
So then what was the next step that you took? You bought that house and you're like, well, they said to get us in real estate, they meant like not just that house. So like walk me through like what led you guys to purchase your first home here and then flip it, and walk me through that process.
Yeah. Well, the house in Italy was really, really cheap. We actually found it on an Instagram post called Cheap Old Houses. So it didn't take that much of our HELOC. And so we came back and we were going to do it with our friends, but they just weren't in a place to start that. And so we reached out to a mentor here in town, and he got us connected to a few wholesalers and just started getting their emails and looking. And there was a house up in Reservoir Hill that's all brick and just so quaint, and started looking at it, asking lots of questions, and bought it within like 2 weeks, I think.
From a scale 1 through 10, how much knowledge did you feel like you and your husband combined had in everything, like the financing, the purchasing, the renovating, the everything? 1 through 10, whenever you guys, like after you guys bought that house in Tuscany, like where were you guys at? 1 through 10.
I think like basic, just owning our own home. We knew how to do that, but not renovating homes at all. And Italy is so different. It's not even a flip. It's a complete restoration. It's 800 years old. There's no plumbing, no electricity. So I think flipping here in town, we knew very little, but we knew people, which is a blessing.
Which actually, I just listened to a thing this morning that the hack to pretty much be able to get to places you've never been is through people, right?
For sure.
There's so many people, and I think that, I don't know, maybe it's who I'm surrounding myself with, but I feel like I don't hear as much like people that are very like, I'm self-made. Like I feel like there was a while where I did kind of hear it, and there was a big like chip on your shoulder saying like, I did this all by myself. And I think, like I said, I don't know, I think there's probably still people out there that are like that, but most people that I like surround myself are very like, hey, I couldn't have done this without all these people, right? And that's truly like the hack to life. It's like whether you want to do real estate, whether you want to do whatever dream that you have, there's people that you currently are connected to, and there's people that you haven't met that can get you to that dream a lot faster than even if you try to do it by yourself. So, and with that being said, when I was having coffee with you and your husband, it seemed like you guys knew the entire coffee shop, because everybody was like, you know, but
our whole church hangs out there every day for their remote jobs.
Well, so it sounds like you had a lot of people to ask of this.
Yeah.
So
we're collectors of people and elders and wise people.
So how many people played a part into from like the HELOC which that's already those friends that probably told you like, hey, you probably have equity in your house, to like selling the house. How many people do you think that you've had involved on like an advice that you actually took? Because of course everybody wants to give their advice, and sometimes you're like, well, I mean, I don't know if I should take that or not. So how many people do you think you had involved to make that happen?
Probably 2 really great ones. So my mother-in-law's in real estate. She's a little bit more worried that we're going to lose all our life savings, thinking about her lovely grandkids. But then our mentor, Roger, was like, okay, here's the wholesalers to work with. Here's the contractors to work with. And that was invaluable. Like not having to go out and find people that you trusted. Like we've got a floor guy that we work with that I would suggest to everyone. And we've only worked with him once, but he was incredible, and all came from Roger saying, call these people.
Who's this Roger guy?
Roger Nix. He used to be the pastor over at Believers Church.
Okay. You guys known him for a long time? Mm-hmm. And then he just has like real estate experience himself? Gotcha. So 2 people, your mother-in-law and Roger. And at that point, did they guide you step by step on throughout this entire process, or kind of how did that look? Yeah,
we planned to do it step by step with Roger, but if you know Roger Nix in Tulsa, he travels the world all the time, more than we do. And so we would more like text and like, hey, give us advice on this situation. But we called his people, and his contractors, plumbers, then they walked us through everything.
Those were all his contractors? Gotcha. And for anybody listening that has no idea on this, that is probably, aside from like, depending on where you're at with financing, because even if you have, good credit, you have low debt to income, getting financing for like an investment property sometimes can be tough, but that's more likely whenever you have more properties that you're acquiring. But the contractors are, if you don't,
sure you can trust them.
Yes. Even as little as trust as, I feel like people sometimes go to the extreme of like, steal your money, this and that, which that can happen.
That happens, yeah.
But I'm talking about like, I'll be there tomorrow, and
yeah, for sure.
You never hear from them, or like, I'll be there this Friday.
Yeah.
And it's like, who is this again? And it's like, did you delete our text? Like,
yeah, for sure.
What is going on? So
our roofer was ready to put a new roof on before we even closed, and I was like, oh, I need you to wait until. We bought it April 1st and we sold it the end of July. So our team was incredible.
You guys did it super fast, which is great. I feel like most people that I've had on that have do flips either for a living or on the side or have had experience with it. One of the number one mistake that they all make is the first one takes a long time. And because contractors can take a really long time. So it sounds like yours were ready even before you were ready.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we were done in June, bought it April 1st.
So pros and cons on the new adventure that you guys took of getting into real estate. What are some of your pros and cons after, doing the whole thing?
Pros, I really enjoyed designing it. It was almost 100-year-old house, so we didn't want to just do a basic gray flip. We put in some, we discovered the original tile in the bathroom, but it had cracks in it. But we got a look-alike tile and tried to put a lot of personality and character that the house already had when it was built, tried to put that back into it. I think that's what helped it sell as well. But that was really fun.
That was really fun for you, yeah. Yeah. So
and we even put in, no one had heard of this, so I'm going to brag on it. Maybe I'm exceptional in this area. A sink dishwasher combination.
Okay.
So one side of it was a sink and the other was a dishwasher that you just press on it and it opens up and you put the dishes in it.
Okay.
And then it closes back down, but it takes about the space of a regular sink.
Okay.
So, but it was such a small house, there wasn't a place for a dishwasher. So we found that and installed it. So
wow.
Put a little
How much smaller is that than a regular dishwasher?
Oh, much smaller.
Like
it's
tiny.
Probably a foot.
I don't think I've ever seen that, but that's because a lot of those houses don't have dishwashers, do they?
No.
So that's a good way to make the most out of your space for sure. Mm-hmm. So what's the plan for you guys? You guys are still traveling a lot, and you guys are still looking for houses to flip and stuff. So what's the goal for you? Like, I want to hear from somebody that thinks like I'm pretty mediocre at most things. Like, what's the plan for within real estate, within the house in Tuscany? What's the plan? Like the goal, excuse me.
Yeah. So the plan is we're really flipping the houses here to get the money to restore in Italy. And it's gorgeous. I mean, it's stone, 800 years old. The top floor would have been where people lived, and the bottom floor was the barn. So even like in the floors of the upstairs, you have holes where they would just stick down the hay so they didn't have to walk outside and go downstairs to feed the animals. But so our goal is to really invest there and get that ready for our family, for other families. One of our dreams is that we have a lot of pastors and missionaries and nonprofit workers in our life, and having a place for them to just be able to go sit in Tuscany for a couple of weeks, or artists go and work there. That's a dream of ours, to just make that available. So when we go travel, we can stop there, or we can send some of our friends over there to rest and then have it as an Airbnb for other guests. So that's the first thing we really want to do, is get the resources to restore that. And then we would love to travel a lot more. Now, Tariku just got into this great school, so he's not homeschooled anymore, so we can't travel all the time. Like, we would like to just, it's much cheaper to travel when all the kids are in school.
Yeah.
So we would like to have jobs where we can take off for the summer when he's out of school, just pick up and go to Europe and travel around and work remotely. And that would be the long-term goal for the next 10 years that we would love to get to.
What's been your favorite place that you've been to?
We love Turkey, Cappadocia, Turkey. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it has, these beautiful caves. I don't even know, like, cave rock formations coming out of the ground. It's just gorgeous.
And I think you guys showed me that. Didn't you guys stay at a cave hotel when you were there?
We did, yeah.
I had to see a picture of this because I couldn't believe it. Like, I was just like, wait, what?
Love it.
And it looked like a really nice hotel, but it's in a cave. It was insane.
Yeah. It's we love to go to places where there are not very many American tourists.
Okay.
And there were tons of Asian and European tourists there, and we love Italy now. We've only been twice, but we love it there.
How long did you have to make the decision to buy that house?
So our friends, they went, I think it was March of 2023, and saw a few houses in this tiny village. And then they called us and said, that was in March, called us and said, hey, there's a house next door. Do you want to go in together and get it? We're like, well, have you seen it?
Yeah.
And he said, no, we can't get into it because these 3 older sisters, they're like in their 90s, owned it. And he said, let's just wait and see if the real estate agent can get information on it, see what they want for it. And they called us in May and said, okay, we want like 15,000 euros for it. And here's a few pictures. And we were splitting it with our friends, so it was a no-brainer for us. So that was March, May, and then we bought it in August, never having seen it.
Dang. So
in person.
It was, you had time to make a decision, sounds like, but with very little details.
It was kind of a no-brainer when it was going to be like $7,000 for us to own I called it a barn.
So why did it take so long though? To close.
I think, now I'm not an Italian real estate expert, but I think it can take about 6 months to close there. But that gave us time to find reasonable tickets. And
well, that's another thing that we should be blessed with too, because over here, sometimes I tell people that, we're closing in 30 days and they're like, oh my gosh, you can't do it. My fastest closing has been 8 days, and that's the quickest you can close a deal.
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Last thing I wanted to talk to you about was one of the things that I like to kind of ask people is pretty much like, how did you get to where you are today? And I like to ask that with like, who are your mentors? And I haven't had somebody on that was so like, it seems like you're honestly kind of like I like to say kind of like me, as far as like you're constantly looking for people's wisdom, like especially like older people.
Yeah.
And you gave a lot of credit to a few people, and even had some quotes in there and everything, which I loved. So talk to me about that. Like, where do you get that from? And have you always been like that too, where you're constantly trying to like, you know, get wisdom from older people?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's a characteristic I just have, but I know in junior high, after I started my faith journey with Jesus, my youth pastor had an older lady in the church disciple me for about 6 months every week. And then I just started hanging around them. The pastor's wife was my Sunday school teacher and had incredible wisdom, and she would invite me out on Saturdays to just sit down and talk and read scripture together when I was a senior. And so, yeah, I have a friend now that says I care as a collector of elders. But, yeah, this is a terrible answer. I don't really know. But it started when you were in junior high, and then it kind of went from there. How many mentors do you think you have right now? I have at least 2 that I'm on a weekly basis. We don't sit down for like let's go through this program. I just shoot ideas by him and ask him questions. And
I think that a lot of people try to overcomplicate things, like a mentor, like you said.
Yeah.
Like people think of a mentor and they're like, oh, well, I have to meet with him once a week.
Yeah.
And you know what I tell people is one of my biggest mentors is Darren Hardy. I don't know if you know who he is. He wrote a book called oh my gosh, what was the book that he wrote? That it's supposed to be my favorite book, but it's not the Atomic Habits, but it's oh my gosh, I'll think of it. But anyways, he's like this big business coach, and you know, has written a few books, and The Compound Effect, that's what it's called.
Okay.
And he has a thing called Darren Daily, and every single morning from Monday through Friday I listen to it, and it's like 3 to 6 minutes long. And I was like, this guy's my mentor, even though I've never met him.
Yeah,
and then I finally got to meet him at a conference that I went to in Vegas a couple of years ago. And I made like this huge post about it because I was just like so excited to meet him. And I had probably, I don't know, like 7 or 8 messages that people were like, I've never thought about that. I've never thought about it like that. And whenever I spoke with him, he told me, he said, my mentor was Jim Rohn. Do you know who that is? Yeah. Okay. Well, Jim Rohn's like this, like a Tony Robbins, you know, Tony, and actually Jim Rohn was Tony Robbins' mentor as well too. But he said, it's funny that you're telling me this, because I told him that too. I'm like, dude, you've been my mentor for the last 2 years and I'm getting to meet you now. And
I do that, and it comes across so awkward. You probably did it. It was so professional, and they're like, yeah.
Well, I mean, I was just like, I was super excited. Like I was, the way that I can describe it is like people that are going to like a Taylor Swift concert right now. Like that's how I felt inside. And I was letting it show some. And what's so amazing about that is that was the last conference that he spoke at, like because he's like, I'm not going to speak at conferences anymore, pretty much. And then so he told me, like, that's how it happened with me and Jim Rohn. Like I listened to him on cassettes, and I didn't meet him for like the first, I think it was like 5 years or something like that. And then he actually became his real mentor. And then he said even after that, he's like, I would, like my communication with him wasn't like anything crazy, but I just had access to him. And so I'm glad that you said that, because a lot of the times people are like, oh, like I don't know if I have time to have a mentor. You know what I mean? Like especially in this busy world. But
sit by him at church, sit by him, you know, just do life together. That's how I've collected mine.
I love it.
And a lot of mine are not, they don't have a social media account. They're not big names that you're going to know. I think that's incredible, because they have incredible wisdom, which is really how the world was built to be, you know?
That's another thing too, that I'm glad you said that too, because people think that whoever your mentor is does have to have this major influence, and translated in today's world, it is pretty much like social media, right? So I feel like it doesn't even matter if you're like wealthy anymore in this world. No. It's like, well, how famous are you? Like it's like, you know, and it doesn't have to be like that. Like I just had a guy Arturo for the 100th episode, and he's over 600 doors on that's how how many he's an incredible guy. But he talked to me about who his mentor is, and he's like, dude, nobody knows who this guy is. Like, he's just like this old rich guy that just I happened to meet because I went to when I was younger, I went to like trim his bushes, and then he asked me how much. And I just said, just pay me what's fair. And then that's what started the relationship. And he's like, I talk to him like maybe once a week. And those are the best. Because I feel like people are very like, oh my gosh, like, you know, my story is kind of different because of course it was just a cool experience, but just because I never even thought that I would meet Darren or anything like that. But anyways, Kara, thanks so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Thank you for sharing a little bit more of your story and for all the good that you and your husband do in the world. I know that we didn't even touch, you know, a lot of it, but super excited for what you and your family are doing and are going to be doing in the future. And anything else you want to share?
No, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.